Welcome to the Resilient Woman Leadership Podcast, where professionally minded women explore the art of grounding into the powerful foundation that makes us resilient leaders in business and in life. I'm your host, Kathryn Regganie, and I believe that when we women connect deeply with our truest selves, we can collectively shift our leadership culture towards compassion, cohesion, and true creativity. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I am so excited to introduce to you Beth Brunk. She is a believer in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. She sees his hand in everything around her and in her life experiences. She gives him all the glory, praise, and honor for healing from sexual betrayal, trauma that he has brought to her through many different modalities. Now, she doesn't believe that we can fully be healed in this life. We are human, and full healing will come later. However, she is fully convinced that the Bible teaches us to continue to work on healing and breaking generational strongholds, agreements, and curses. She does the work daily. Now she has the energy to get through her entire day without a nap. She has a full freedom of thoughts without them swirling around. Her pain has dissipated, and she is well on her way to living in abundance and freedom from the pain of sexual betrayal. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Kathryn.
I am excited to be here too. I know we had a conversation before we started recording a few weeks ago, and I just loved where everything ended up. So I'm really excited to dig in today and see where everything goes. Beth, before we dive into things, can you just tell us a little bit more about how you got here to this particular specialty that you focus on now?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, I have my own story of sexual betrayal, like is mentioned in my bio. I got married when I was 20 years old and did not know at that time that my new husband was addicted to pornography and had been since he was 12 years old. So there was a lot of abuse within the marriage. There was sexual abuse. On our honeymoon, he actually masturbated in front of me, and that was like so nasty. There was rape, marital rape. And then there was all kinds of other abuse. There was religious abuse. He would use the scriptures against me and say, well, the Bible says that you have to do this. And it was taking things completely out of context. It's not actually what the Bible says, but it fit his purposes. There was financial abuse, mental and emotional. And then there was physical abuse towards our children, as well as some grooming of the girls. And if he did it to the girls, I would assume he did it to the boys too.
Yeah. Yeah. So you reached a point where you were like, okay, this is not good. This is not okay. So tell me about how you transitioned out of the situation.
Well, I did reach a point. I don't even know. The only thing I can say is that Father woke me up one morning and said, ask him if he's still looking at pornography. Because he would, through the years, he confessed that he was doing it at least twice that I can think of. And I don't know that I really ever asked because it was painful. I didn't really want to know. There was enough pain already that I didn't want to add that on top of it. And one morning I woke up and I said, are you still looking at pornography? And he got really quiet and he said, yes. And I said, okay, you need to move out. And there wasn't like any big epiphany or anything that like led me to asking that question. It's just I woke up and I just asked it. And he did move out, but he was only moved out of our home for about 4 months. And because I didn't have support, I didn't have community around me that supported me. And so he moved home about 4 months later and should not have. He should have not ever moved back home till he had gotten things worked out, but he did. And in that time, I actually read a book called The Speed of Trust. And as I was reading the book, I was like, because I had been telling him, and I told him often over the years, I don't believe anything that you say. I don't even often believe your actions. Um, and like there was no trust. I had absolutely no trust for him. And so I read this book, and it's by Stephen Covey, his son, Stephen M.R. Covey. And he talked about how quickly trust can be broken and how quickly it can be built up. And I took it and applied it to myself as well, I can quickly break my own trust and I can quickly build up trust within myself, right? And it's the same way with other people, a word or an action or the lack of an action or the lack of words can all break someone's trust. And we don't get to say, no, I didn't break your trust. That's their own feeling, right? That's their own, I'm not sure the word I went there, but they get to have that experience and they get to put that experience into words. So he could have told me, yeah, you do trust me. You just keep saying that you don't. But I knew I didn't. And he didn't want to believe that I didn't. So I read that book and I began to understand that my lack of trust in him, I had that lack of trust for a good reason. It was because of his betrayal, his actions, his words, and literally lack of integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I remember a conversation where you started realizing that you didn't even trust yourself.
Right. Yep. I realized that I didn't even trust myself. And a lot of that was because I would have an experience. I would say, this is what I experienced. And he would say, well, that didn't happen. I didn't say that. And then it would cause me to question, well, did I imagine it? Why do I feel this way if that's not really what happened? And so it, it, those experiences eroded my trust in myself. Not to mention the fact that I wasn't taught how to listen to my own intuition. And so that played into it as well. When someone isn't taught and doesn't know how to listen to their intuition, it's going to be pretty easy to erode their trust in themselves. But a lack of trust in yourself is self-betrayal. So I betrayed myself also for many years until I read this book, Speed of Trust, and began to realize and understand how quickly trust can be broken and then rebuilt.
Yeah.
And I started to rebuild trust with myself pretty quick.
Right. And I remember during our conversation, your ex-husband was uh, predominant in the church. And even when you had mentioned some things to the other ladies, people, it was like they didn't believe you or they just couldn't, it was like complete denial.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I say, excuse me, that's why I say I didn't have support, because I started sharing that he was a pornography addict. And the response that I got back was, well, but he does the audio for church and he dances and he's so involved. And it was like, well, yeah, that's what you're seeing on the outside, but what you're not seeing is what's going on behind closed doors at home.
Right.
So yeah, I was not believed. And at one point I was even told, well, at least it's just pornography and it's not an actual affair. It shouldn't bother you that much.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But
They
what
didn't know about the other stuff.
Right, right. And I didn't even start sharing like about the masturbation on the honeymoon and the rapes until recent years, because I didn't have the verbiage for that. It was in the last 5 or 6 years that I even realized that marital rape was a thing. And there's actually laws in different states that you can report your husband for raping you while you're married and he can get in trouble. I didn't know any of that. And it's just been in recent years that I realized that. And so there's oftentimes for people, there's this lack of vocabulary to put to what they've experienced as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, when we had that conversation, I realized, they're really, when you're in that marriage realm, it's hard because the rules seem like they're different.
Right.
It's okay, you're married, so is it really rape? Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes.
And I've heard that through you, and I know my grandmother was in a similar situation. So it's a pretty serious situation that we just don't talk about
Right.
openly and out loud for whatever reason that is. And I really appreciate the fact that you really started to question your own trust in yourself, and then you started to trust yourself. And I remember part of the conversation we had was when I think it was the final time you kicked your husband out. I think your kids asked you like, "So how long is that going to last?" And you said,
Yep.
"We're done."
Right, right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I ended up kicking him out a second time because he choked our oldest son to the point of blackout, and the entire family was just walking on eggshells. Like we weren't sleeping, we were highly irritable, and we were just, I literally remember feeling like I was tiptoeing around my house, trying to not set him off. He had never went to that length before. There had been abuse of the children, but never anything like that. And so that one, I had built up enough trust in myself till that point that I was like, okay, none of us are happy. None of us are feel safe. I need you to move out, and you're not coming home this time until you've gotten significant help. Anger management classes, therapy, whatever that help looks like, you're not coming home until I see a massive change in you. And you've said my former husband, my ex-husband, I clearly have divorced him.
Yeah.
I saw that change. But it was because I had built up so much trust within myself, with myself, that I was able to do that, to put myself and my children first ahead of my marriage and say, no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And my children did, when I told them that he was moving out, when we told them he was moving out and he wasn't coming home, they were like, yeah, sure. We don't believe you. And I was like, no, he's not. And he never did. He never came back home.
Yeah. And I remember our initial discussion. I just thought that was such a pivotal moment for you and for the kids. And, with that whole continuation and now your divorce, you really showed the kids that it's okay to trust yourself. It might be hard and it
Mm-hmm.
might be a process, but really just standing in your own skin, in your own self, with the only support you had through, his hands and his blessings, that this was the way it was going to be. And I just thought that was such a cool lesson for the kids. I don't know if they saw it as that, or what, but what are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, as I was listening to you, I realized that not only did it build more and more trust within me for myself, but also for my children, that um, that I did stick with my word. I did keep my word, and I even took it further when there was more information that started coming out from my children. I took it further, and I completely separated myself from him. And while I know with my oldest daughter that restored a lot of trust because actually I don't remember if we talked about this or not before, but she tried to run away and some friends caught her and prevented it happening. But she did ultimately then end up running away later. Um, but I didn't have a relationship with her for 2.5 years.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't until I a friend really, really encouraged me to call her because she was getting married and I wasn't invited to the wedding, that I called her and I left her a voicemail and I said, I'm divorcing your dad. And within 5 minutes, my phone rang and I talked to her for an hour after not having any contact with her for 2.5 years.
Wow.
So by doing, by kicking him out, and then by hearing what she had to tell me about his behavior towards her, And then divorcing him, that rebuilt, that went a long ways in restoring her trust in me, potentially ever.
Yeah.
And so now I have relationship with her, and we talk every week, multiple times a week. We talk.
That's fantastic.
She calls me out of the blue. And then my other three children, I know my youngest daughter, she trusts me, and she's only 11, but I have given her information. Some of it, most of it age appropriate, some of it a little above her age, but she gets it. She understands what happened, and she trusts me. Now, my boys, they've been angry with me because I divorced their dad, right? One of them believed their father that I was the reason that the divorce happened. The other one has been angry that I divorced his father, and then I have a restraining order. They cannot see their father until he does these specific things according to the parenting plan, which he's told me this year he's not going to do. So I think ultimately, even if they don't, even if that didn't build trust with me with them in the here and now, in the future, as they gain maturity and age and look back, it will definitely help them understand and trust me that I have their best interest at heart.
Right. Their best interest and yours, because
Mhm.
it's important that you are well and trust yourself for them. And
Right.
it's really interesting that, it was kind of interesting because when you said one of your sons said, it's your fault that the divorce was happening, you're like, well, yes, yes, it is. I'm the one who's really going to make this happen. The reason for the divorce wasn't anything that I did, but definitely I'm making this happen because that's what I need to do if I'm going to be able to trust myself.
Right.
So I think that's really, really fantastic. I applaud you, Beth. I think it's really fantastic what you're doing. And now you're helping other people with similar kinds of things.
Yes. Yep. Now I work with other mothers and women who have been sexually betrayed by their husbands.
Excellent. And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Well, I have a website, bethbrunk.com, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Alignable, and LinkedIn, and it's all under Beth Brunk Coaching.
Excellent. And all of that will be on our show notes. So if you're not in a place you can write any of that down, it'll be on the show notes. And I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to have another conversation, Beth. It's just been such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Kathryn.
You're welcome.
You
Talk
just
soon.
you exude joy. I just
Oh,
love you.
thank you. I like to be joyful. All right. Stop. Thanks for listening to the Resilient Woman Leadership Podcast. Remember to take my Dragon Woman quiz at dragonwomanquiz.com. In just 2 minutes, this fun quiz will reveal your Dragon Woman and connect you to the resources so that you can leverage her power for good. And if you've enjoyed this episode, subscribe now so you can hear more inspiring stories from other resilient, wise women who will uplift and inspire you. Your review really matters to me, so please gift me back by reviewing this episode. Want more, Kathryn? You can find me at energy-pathways.com.